Hey everyone, and welcome to the Hamilton Arts Awards. My name is Gavin Stephens, and I'll be the host and MC for this year's festivities. You might have seen me on CTV or the Comedy Network, possibly CBC, but I also host my own podcast called Uncolonized. Some of you might be thinking, Gavin, how come you're going into my ear holes and not in front of my eyeball places? That's because this year's award show is going to be a podcast. For those of you my age and a little bit older, a podcast is a radio play on the internet. Each episode, I'll be interviewing a winner, allowing you to get to know each and every one of these talented people. We had a lot of laughs, got to know the artists, and found out what each one of these talented people planned on doing with their award after the show. I had a great time hanging out with these people, and I hope you do as well. So without further ado, please enjoy the Hamilton Arts Awards podcast.
Elements all night, I call it quits. I cry about the politics, but I know.
Janet Rogers is a Mohawk Tuscarora writer from the Six Nations territory of the Grand River, where she operates the Ojitsto publishing label. Janet works in page poetry, spoken word performance poetry, video poetry, and recorded poetry with music. She is a radio broadcaster, documentary producer, and media and sound artist. Over the past 11 months, Janet has been the Mabel Pugh Taylor Artist in Residence, a joint effort with McMaster University and HPL. The Arts Awards are pleased to have commissioned a series of recordings from Janet that will appear in each episode of our podcast series.
Green, green gold. Before church bells, after the rain, they came to my garden offering throat songs, so strong a choice of voices. Croaking like an ancient chant, a nature lullaby quickly switching, unable to not listen. Invading all my senses, collections of tones, unsynchronized and constant. I thought I was going crazy, raising in volume until there was nothing but frog song. I let go, gave in, relented to listen slowly, so slowly. The croaking became voices, telling me stories of tomorrow, fortune-telling, so knowing of my past, adept at my present, cast visions of the future I had no control. Arrested in pulsating sounds, allowed my spirit to blend, reverberating, resonating, never ending, until the bell rang again. And I fell back into myself. Said goodbye to my green friends and their gifts and visions. Our relations gone back to the land.
Now please welcome Ward 3 Councillor Narinder Nan on behalf of the City of Hamilton.
Congratulations to all the nominees and recipients of this year's Hamilton Arts Awards. Over the last year of this pandemic, the wonder and the discovery and the beauty of your expressions shared virtually have been an absolute light inside of the darkness that we've been walking through. Thank you so much to all of the artists and all the various ways that you practice your mediums. Your work, your talent, your skills are more precious and valued than ever before, I believe. And what a wonderful, wonderful year to kick it off. The 45th Annual Arts Award. It's sad that we can't celebrate it in person, but I have so much faith that we'll be able to be there together next year. And thanks so much to everybody who's been working behind the scenes to keep this fun, interactive, and really shifting with the format in order to keep things exciting and accessible this year. Again, congratulations to everybody, and thank you so much. Art is not a mirror held up to reality, but a hammer with which to shape it. And that is my favorite quote of all times. I'll share it every single year at every single Hamilton Art Awards. And here in the Hammer, our artists are fabulous. So thank you.
This is a bit nerve-wracking, telling jokes like to no one. It's COVID. This is how the format's going to be this year for the award show. It's a podcast. But I can't tell. I don't know if you're laughing or you're enjoying yourself. I can only guess. That's why I put those long pauses in between my bits. That was a big laugh right there. Wait until the standing ovation. All that being said, I have a podcast called Uncolonized. Each week, my friend Daniel Grant and I talk about social issues, political issues, pop culture issues, and racism in Canada, and we make it funny. I know that's hard to understand, but if you listen to it, you'll get it. You can listen to it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts. Anywhere you listen to podcasts, you can get Uncolonized.
Midnight snack in my morning glory. Baby, without you, I'm in purgatory. A big newspaper without a story. Chasing headlines.
Creator Arts Award winner Jim Ruxton is a media artist and electronics engineer. He works and collaborates in film, installation, theater, and dance, fusing technology with art, often creating work that is interactive. Jim has been a director of the Art and Science Festival, Subtle Technologies, for 17 years.
My name is Jim Ruxton, and I'm a media artist, basically. I work with electronics in media arts.
How did you get into that art form?
Well, I have an interesting background in that I've got a degree in electronics engineering. I went to school to be an engineer and then worked for a few years as an engineer, as electronics engineer. And then I got bored with being just an engineer. And so I went back to school. I went to OCAD, went to school there and studied media arts. So that's sort of where I got into it. And then after that, I got into the film industry. And that was sort of a way of using what I learned at OCAD and in a artsy kind of way in film.
Was there like a specific moment where you're like, I got to get into art, or is it just a gradual thing?
While I was doing engineering, I was also studying dance. And I got really, really interested in the idea that, wow, maybe you could actually combine electronics with dance in some interesting way. So while I was studying dance, I was reading also a lot of kind of interesting journals at the time on performance art and reading about artists who are using things like brainwaves to make sounds. And I just started to get jealous thinking, gee, I've got some skills that I could probably apply to that area. So then I just got itchy. I decided to leave Ottawa, where I was working as an engineer, and move to Toronto and go to art school. So
That's a huge jump. That's like,
it was, especially my friends. My friends didn't quite understand it. All my friends at the time were engineers. So I was leaving a pretty lucrative career. I was working in high frequency electronics, sort of satellite communications and stuff with I don't think I've ever been paid as much as I was way back then, many, many years ago. So, but I was looking for something that would pay my soul, I suppose, rather than my pocket.
I would imagine being an engineer, that's like one side of your brain, and then being an artist is another side. Yeah, you followed your passion. Is it? Am I right on that, or is that?
Yeah, no, totally. I think you're totally right. My brain's kind of split in half and causes problems at times, but it also keeps me busy and happy.
It makes you interesting for sure. That's we're in the middle of COVID. Are you taking care of yourself? Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm okay. It's I can be a bit of a hermit at times in terms of working. I've got a little studio in my basement, so I can kind of bunker down here. And the hardest part has been I have a 9-year-old daughter who is home from school, and that's a challenge. That's the challenging part.
Yeah, I feel sorry for kids during this time.
Oh, it's awful. It's just,
Yeah.
she I can just see her sitting there and fidgeting and moving, and it's just so hard for kids.
What do you miss most pre-COVID?
Pre-COVID, going out and dancing.
Oh, so you're a dancer. You love dancing.
I love dancing. Yeah, like Suba was one of my favorite places here in Hamilton to go dancing, and I just, I also love the music scene. I love this ain't Hollywood, which unfortunately isn't there, but whole music scene in Hamilton's great, right? So I really miss that.
Yeah, it's a great scene. It's a lot, and it's a tight knit community. Like they really help each other out. I guess same with what I'm learning with the artists here. What kind of music did you enjoy dancing to the most? What style?
Probably house music I really like. I'm also a big reggae freak. I mean, that doesn't happen that often around here, but I love reggae. I love world music. Anything with rhythm.
Have you always been into house music, or is it?
Yeah, I think probably always. I mean, electronic dance music, anything with a rhythm, like I say, I've really always been into. I mean, when I was really, really young, I even was into disco. Yeah, like anything with a beat. So whatever I could dance to, I suppose I've really been into. But lately I've been into country more and folk. I actually during the pandemic I bought myself an electric guitar, which I've never done before. I've never played guitar, so I've been kind of learning some of that. So that's been really an interesting aspect of the pandemic, is it's allowed me to cocoon and learn how to play guitar.
You seem like a person who loves to challenge themselves. Like, you have no problem with, like, "All right, let's jump off and do something else."
Oh yeah, I mean that's especially in my career in the film industry. Whenever somebody asks me to build something in terms of special effects or whatever, and also with other artists, I've helped a lot of other artists with their projects. It's always a different thing. Never the same project. It's just so I do love that challenge. I must say, it's scary at times because I take something on thinking, can I really do that? But I'll find a way usually.
Yeah, you did a project, or you're working on a project, I read, that you're combining knitting and coding. Is that what is that?
Yeah, that project is finished now. That was a project with Hitoko Okada and Kalina Maxwell. It was a project that took these knitting machines, and they're typically made for creating scarves and hats and sweaters and all kinds of things. And we took them and motorized them so that they could work automatically. They would sort of be programmed to knit whenever somebody approached them, so they were interactive in that way. So as people move up to these knitting machines, they would suddenly start knitting in front of them, and yeah, it's pretty cool
That
thing.
is
Yeah, we
cool.
showed it, I think, at the 2019 Hamilton Arts Awards.
I'm into coding right now. It's like basically web development, and I did take knitting a while ago. Not take it, but I learned it. I find there's a connection between the two. I couldn't tell you what it is, but it feels in my brain the same kind of muscle I'm using. Did you find that with when you're working on that project? Did you find that there was like a
Oh yeah, definitely. And I'm finding all kinds of really interesting references to it, even since that project. Like I was recently reading about how a woman was a spy and she used to knit codes into scarves, and she'd walk around and walk to places and wear them so that people could read these codes on her scarves. And it was just, it's binary, right? Knit one, purl two. It's a binary code. So yeah, there's a lot of really interesting, and also the history too of knitting goes back to the jacquard loom, which was one of the first kind of, I guess you kind of call it an analog computer. So there's a lot of history where the two overlap.
what does this award mean for you? You won the this award. This is why we're doing this interview. What does it mean to you?
Oh, it's really amazing actually. It's really really exciting because I think some of the work I tend to do, people maybe may not, sometimes people think about art and they see a painting on the wall, or they see a sculpture, they see something, but the kind of work that I do tends to be a bit more, I guess it's kinetic in a way. It's often working with people, that like dancers, for example, and putting sensors on them, and then taking that sensor data and interpreting that, creating and turning that into sound or visuals or other kinds of forms like that. So it's just a really wonderful justification, I think, for me, of my work. It's really quite an honor. So I really appreciate it.
I did study your stuff. Can you explain the Hear, Feel, See, What installation?
Oh, that's a tough one to explain. We're gonna give it a try here, just because it's like a multimodal installation. But I'm gonna give it a shot. So basically, there's a deaf dancer that we know in London, Ontario, and we had her dance to the sights and sounds of both Hamilton and London that artists created. So artists were kind of commissioned to create a soundtrack and a visual track of the two cities. The dancer danced to those. She danced to the soundtrack by wearing a vest that vibrates to the sound, so she would feel the sound in her body because she is deaf,
Mhm.
obviously. So she felt the sound in her body, and she moved to these sights and sounds. And then I captured her movements, captured the way she moved, and then I translated those movements back into these vibrators that were attached to a wall that you could stand up against. So you could basically feel her movements, the way she danced. And then as you stood against this wall and felt the way she danced, you could watch a video of her dancing at the same time as watching the video of Hamilton and listen to the sounds of Hamilton. And we did this simultaneously in London and Hamilton. So in London, you would see video and hear sound and feel sound of London, whereas here in Hamilton, you would feel and see sound of Hamilton. So really interesting project.
The person doing the voiceover was talking about how we are in the process of losing the sounds of our cities.
Yeah,
Is
yeah, yeah.
what like I didn't fully understand what that meant.
Well, it used to be, I guess, that here in Hamilton, you would hear a lot more, not necessarily that's a good thing, but you'd hear a lot of the industrial sounds. You'd also hear things like the whistles during, when people would take lunch breaks. You'd hear, a lot more of the trains. It's just like the sounds of a city kind of get lost. It's different with, say, the visuals, like in terms of visuals, you have photographs and so on, but you don't always have recordings of the sort of the sounds of the cities. You don't really have archives of sounds of the cities. So one of the challenges was to do that. So one of the artists did a soundtrack and kind of looked for sounds that represented Hamilton, both in the past, so industrial sounds, but also kind of industrial sounds from the medical world, because Hamilton, as we know, is kind of turning into a medical center in many ways. So how to represent those sounds. So I think those sounds were sounds of like heart monitors and beeps and things from medical. So the audio track went from the gamut from sort of industrial to medical sounds.
Sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah, it was a lot of work, but there was a number of artists working on it. I think 7 artists worked on that project. So it was a big project, but really really interesting. And I've done a lot of work since then, and even a bit before then with the deaf community, and that's fascinating work.
Why is it important to you to bring artists and science together?
Oh, because they're so for one thing, people don't realize how similar artists and scientists are. Artists really love to discover the world and find ways of discovering, find new ways of discovering the world, as do scientists, right? Scientists are real discoverers too. And so both artists and scientists have a deep sense of curiosity in many, many ways. So when you bring those people together, it's really an incredible kind of dynamic thing that happens. The conversations that happen, the kind of collaborations that can happen, all kinds of fascinating things can come out of that. So I don't know. I just in general we spend way too much time in our little boxes, and that we should really get together and work with people from other fields. That together in collaborations we can just make such richer projects together. I do a lot of interdisciplinary work. So the Live Lab project that we did recently, was a collaboration between myself, a dancer, a sound artist, my partner, the playwright, Anna, and a scientist at Live Lab. So, I think those kind of collaborations are really, really interesting and can just bring a lot to the table.
Are there any artists in Hamilton you'd like to work with, or artists you've worked with that you would work with again?
I mean, I really loved working with Hitoko and Kalina on the knitting project. Love to work on another knitting project, actually. I think that would be really, really, really interesting. After the pandemic, I'm going to be eager, like so eager to get together with other artists and just jam and talk about projects and things.
What do you find is a defining characteristic of Hamilton?
I think, at least for me, what I've seen is just possibility. Like just in terms of spaces, in terms of access to things. I just feel like in Toronto, you'd have to look forever to say find a space to put an installation into, or to create works in, or whatever. But I just feel like here there's just so many people just seem willing and open to kind of open their doors to you. Like the art crawl, right? The way that happened. I mean, it's just amazing to me. I think that people were willing to do that every month to open their doors to people, and just share their spaces, that kind of thing. So, I came here when first came. I got onto the board at Center 3, and through Center 3, it's been really an amazing experience because I've gotten to know some of the people on the board, and just seeing the kind of work they're doing at Center 3 has been really amazing. The work they do with the youth. I just feel like in Hamilton there are just so many more possibilities of things happening here.
Does that influence your work at all, or is it?
I'd say so. Like, that piece, you may have seen the luminous reality piece, the LED cube piece. I wouldn't have been able to easily find a space in Toronto to be able to create a large thing like that. And so here, I was able to rent a space fairly inexpensively and have it there for quite a while. And because that kind of work really needs time to process and to to construct. I mean, I started that thing, and I realized as I was building it, I had to order more parts and build a more solid structure and things like that. And having an expensive place here in Hamilton just allowed me that opportunity to do that, to be able to really make that happen. So yeah, so I think Hamilton just is wonderful in that way, providing those opportunities.
And that's episode 6. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Creator Arts Award winner Jim Ruxton. I know I did. The music in today's episode was by Paulo Leon Riaz, Tara Lightfoot, Dylan Hudecki, and Aline Felice. Illustrations by Joan Krigsman, Robin Lightwalker, and Michael Byers. The City of Hamilton Arts Awards are presented during Arts Week, June 3rd to the 12th. To learn more about Arts Week or the Save the Arts campaign, visit hamiltonartscouncil.ca. Stay tuned for our next episode tomorrow at 7 p.m. Production by Cobalt Connects, Lilt Films, and me, Gavin Stephens.